Okay, welcome everybody to the LF Decentralized Trust Technical Advisory Council meeting. As you are all aware, there are two things that we have to abide by on the call. The first is our antitrust policy, so we need to be aware of and not participate in any activities that are prohibited under any of the antitrust and competition laws across the world. The second thing that we have to abide by is our code of conduct. While everybody is welcome here, we just need to be aware of and not participate in, oh, sorry, my brain went off to the antitrust policy. We just need to be respectful of others on the call and their opinions and ideas, and we should get along fine. And then for those of you who would like to see the full text of the code of conduct, it is linked here in the agenda. For announcements today, we have the standard LF Decentralized Trust Dev Weekly Developer Newsletter that goes out each Friday. If you do have anything that you would like to include in that newsletter, please do leave a comment here at the link that is in the agenda for the next upcoming newsletter. The second announcement that we have is just a reminder, the nomination period for the 2026 TAC term begins October 14th, which I believe is next Monday. If you are interested in nominating yourself for the TAC, we do have a site that will allow you to determine if you're eligible. That site normally gets updated immediately before the nomination period begins. So if you were to go to it today, you may not be eligible, even though you are eligible, because it may not have yet been updated, just for your reference. And then, of course, if you are eligible, there is a mechanism with GitHub issues that you can file your nomination statement. The last announcement, official announcement that we have here is that on Wednesday, 11/12, at 8 p.m., or I'm sorry, 8 a.m. Pacific time, there is a workshop, cross-network interop with Hyperledger Cacti, and there is a link here in the agenda for you to register for that workshop. And Sean, just to be clear, 11/12 is November 12th?
I'll fix that. Yeah, November 12th at
Okay,
8 a.m. PT, 5 p.m. CET.
all right, great, no problem.
Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah. It's just I read that and I was like, I think that's what you mean, but since you've been living in Europe for a while, I wanted to make sure. Um, so yeah, any other announcements that anybody has or would like to make today? Okay, there are no other announcements that anybody has. There are quarterly reports for people to review. I think one of these actually had 5 reviewers as of yesterday. We need 6 as a reminder before we can actually merge anything in. And then the second piece is that we need to not have any comments on any that are not yet resolved. So just FYI, I think some of these other ones are actually waiting on the maintainers or the submitters of those project reports to do some updates before we can actually get those merged into place. So yeah, I think that's it for the submitted quarterly reports. Is there any questions on the submitted quarterly reports that we need to bring up here in the TAC? Okay, I think the only report that I saw that had a question for the TAC, and Hart, you somewhat addressed it in the PR comments, was Besu, who wanted to know if we have any specific guidelines for how AI should be used in projects, which we don't. And a lot of the projects, I guess, within the LF in general are just documenting what it is that they're doing. But at some point, if we feel that's something that we should discuss here, happy to bring that onto a future call. Yeah, Hart.
So I'll just say, since this seems to be a topic of interest, there's not a consensus at the LF at what the policy should be, and lots of projects are doing lots of different things. We would encourage projects it's not a requirement at this point, but we would encourage projects to ask people to document sort of when and how they're using AI. Um, does that make sense? So sort of just ask your contributors to like note if or when they've used AI.
Yep, makes sense. Um, and then I would assume that's probably something that should be added to the contributing guide as well, just to make sure that it's official. This is kind of how we're handling AI within our particular project, Project X, whatever that may be. Diane?
Good. I'm not on mute. Good. Um, so a lot of projects that I've been noticing lately too are also using AI to create test harnesses. So maybe if they could also comment if they're starting to do that as well to, extend exponentially the testing edge cases. So that's it.
All right, thanks, Diane. Okay. So if there's no other questions on the submitted quarterly reports, we do have a number of overdue reports. The one that we should probably talk about is Hyperledger Bevel. So it's been 2 months since they've submitted a quarterly report. I did reach out to them on when I created the agenda to, just let them know and find out, hey, are you going to be submitting one soon? Or should we be considering whether we move the project to a dormant or an end of life type stage? And the response came back from one of the maintainers that the project should be moved to dormant. So that before we move projects between life cycle stages, that's something for us to discuss at the TAC and take a vote on if that is something that we would like to do. So wanted to bring that to the attention of folks on the call and see if there's any specific discussion that people might have on that. All right, if there's no discussion, then I guess I will make a motion to move Bevel to dormant stage. Could we have a second?
I second that.
All right, thanks, Arun. And Ryan, did
Okay,
you want us to
sure.
help us vote?
Yeah. In the matter of moving Bevel to a dormant status, all the voting members of the TAC who approve, please say aye.
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 All of those who abstain, please say abstain. All of those not in favor, please say nay. The motion passes on a voice vote.
All right, thanks, Troy. So we'll get that one moved to dormant. Obviously, there is a way to bring that project back if for some reason the maintainers do find the time to do that. That's always possible. So this is not this is never the end of a project when we do vote to move projects to either dormant or end of life. This is just a more really of a notification to folks that, hey, we need more maintainers or more people to step in here. I know that was reported early on with Bevel that they did need some help, and so this is probably not anything new to anybody, but just FYI that it's not anything that should be of major concern. This is normal life cycle for projects. Okay, for the other thing in the overdue reports, Hyperledger Cacti, Rama, you did ask for an extension until next week to provide that to us. That is fine. I appreciate you reaching out and just letting us know that you've had some scheduling difficulties with getting it done. And so not a problem for you to have another week if you need it. All right, upcoming reports, we do have the Identis and Web3J report that are due today. And then the Hyperledger Indie and Hyperledger non-creds are due next week. So that should cover reports, at least the main section of the reports, because we do have a discussion item today that is the Trust over IP annual report discussion. So Diane and Rama, you were responsible for this one, and I know you've done some really good work in taking a look at what's been done. I did invite the Trust over IP folks in
Thank
their
you.
general channel to this. I do not see anybody on the call specifically related to Trust over IP, but I'm happy for us to have the discussion here so that we can find out how things are going and what you've discovered there.
All right. And I did get about 30 minutes in prior to this meeting with Rama to review this. And I apologize, folks. I've been camping until late last night. So I just posted and I put it in the chat, the report. And if I can share my screen, I will do that and share entire screen, share, and this is actually both an annual and a quarterly report review. So I tried to break it down into two parts because there were a lot of documents to look at. But it was actually quite interesting. And in my comment, I've put in a whole bunch of links to other things because I'm not sure everybody is going to want to parse through all of the attachments and other links to this. And so and it was very interesting, and I learned a lot about it. And I know we've had some when Cheng was on a call about 4 weeks ago, a TAC call, and there was some discussion about developing a new template specifically um, for standards initiatives under the LFDT, and I definitely think that's a thing that we should do. But in this case in point, taking them as is, I think is a fine thing to do. They supplied us with a ton of reference documentation, some of which I went through, and a lot of us I kind of scanned. I'm not sure Rama did as deep of a dive, but he also read through some of it, and I encourage you all to do so as well. And so I broke it into strengths and areas to watch, and then a little bit about an overall assessment. But then in the annual report, I've put in a section about future reports too that I'll and it is a pretty diverse organizationally initiative, and there's lots of standard members. They have a membership model as opposed to using GitHub for contributors or maintainers kind of thing for tracking the participation in the project. And so that's pretty impressive, and they continue to grow that. There's a lot of deliverables, as I mentioned. I list them in here, and I encourage you to do some of it. There's a lot. The newcomers stuff is very good, and this is the data from their annual report. So this is last year's work. Some of the areas to watch, I think, are because I love metrics, and maybe not all of you do as much as I do, but I think a few more sections by the numbers section in the report would have been helpful to really understand who's got pilots, any potential POCs, where other organizations are leveraging this work would be very helpful to the visibility of it. They have a lot of outputs that are still in public review or sort of implementers drafts. So a clear paths would be, with some target dates, would be helpful. And a little task force hygiene. So if you go through some of the slide decks, there are some, very short topics from the task force, but some explicit outcomes and different transitions would make it easier and probably avoid the perception, like as I say here, of fragmentation. But my overall assessment is that the project is got strong foundational work. There's a steady flow of people in the working groups working. They've got, and I've encountered them in lots of different ecosystem alignments as well. So that would be really the thing that would help is getting some adoption and spec maturity signals to make it a little bit more obvious. And I know LFX doesn't really cover this stuff, so I think there's some work to be done on both our parts to make that happen. And you know, they seem to have good governance practices, lots of participation, so their community health is pretty good. And I think we should, you know, and I think we do consider them strategically important to the LF and to our projects. So I think I'm totally happy to approve their annual report as is. But one of, you know, one of the things that, since we are mostly project people here on this call, tracking and using member foundation membership as your metric isn't always a good show of participation. It's maybe a good show of business development skills on the part of the community leaders, but not always participatory. So I would like to see more of the work that's being done and the white papers that are being developed maybe to be moved into GitHub and having the comments and things like that put on there as opposed to mailing lists and other places. Because if you go in, excuse me, and look at LFX right now, it says 3 contributors are doing 50% of all the contributions. And depending on which date range you use, it can be even worse. So, you know, the optics aren't great, but also it's my belief that that GitHub is even more open than Google mailing lists and other things like that, which you have to join in order to view this stuff, or it's just GitHub will make things a little bit more open and transparent and maybe grow the contributors in there. So if you were looking at it from an LFDT project kind of person perspective, that can be worrisome, and I think we've flagged that before. However, it's not atypical for a standards project to not use GitHub, and it's kind of expected that the writers of things and the people who actually do stuff in GitHub are there. And I've been in a number of other standards projects where it hasn't been in GitHub. So, you know, that may be the path that they decide to choose. But I would strongly suggest using a little bit more GitHub. And there's a thing in metricing world called the bus factor. That it's, you know, there just a few folks are really contributing. So if someone key to the project leaves, it could harm the project significantly or moves on to another project and loses attention and focus on this one. That could be a problem. Yeah, and again, governance might be outweighing coding and influence. Some of these are pretty basic. Opportunities for onboarding and growing capacity. It's a hard thing to get up to speed on, especially with all the documents you have to review, though they have done a pretty good job of creating newcomer information. And the other thing, again, I am a bit of a metrics person, attribution hygiene to the organizations and who's actually contributing to the documents would help. So maybe some how to get credit on the reports. And so that's the annual report, and there's a little bit more here. Then, as they moved on in the quarterly report, a lot of things around the working groups remained, the core ones remained pretty active. There just seems to be some good expansion into the AI and the trust graph working group. So that was great. You know, I think there's this, you can read through this at your own leisure. Again, evidence of adoption would be really helpful. figuring out what the spec maturity levels are, and again, whether they get the new working groups and and a way to check the working group participation would be great. But overall, I think both of these reports are completely showing that the group is doing good work and expanding, and they've got enough for us to approve this. So I'm going to pause. Why is it a 2024 report is the question you have there, Hendrik, because it's very overdue, and the annual report was for the period prior to when it was submitted. So it's always the prior year, I believe, is the way I looked at it.
Yeah, it gets quite
Okay.
confusing. I think we had this question before. It's supposed to be the Q1, the 2025 Q1, or I think we say 2025 annual review, which obviously looks back, and then also forward. So it looks back at 2024 as to what were the accomplishments, and then the looking forward is what sort of goals do you have for 2025. So if it is named 2024, I think we do ask for people to change that in the title. But obviously that's minor, and we can obviously get that
Yeah.
fixed.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. I assume I asked the same earlier this year for another one. Yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
I remember. I think it was Basu that we had that with.
Yeah, it's all fun and games. Yeah, so I think it was long overdue, and it's long over. It took us a couple of weeks extra to get the review, so I thank them for bearing with our patience with our process as Rama went out on vacation. Rama, do you want to add anything to that? I think I saw a comment at the bottom here.
Yeah, I'm just echoing what you said, Diane. As you said earlier, I didn't do as deep or wide of an assessment as you did. I mean, I think you looked at a lot of documents. I looked at some of them, and I just got an impression of how the project has been going. So yeah, I mean, since new project, and there's a lot of activity. People are talking on the Discord channels. I see a lot of GitHub PRs on the various repos. So yeah, my assessment is keep it as an incubating project, which is like the one decision we are supposed to do, supposed to make as a TAC. And other than that, yeah, I echo your what you said about encouraging the project's maintenance to use GitHub. One suggestion I made here, it's inspired by my own experiences. You can have documents be maintained in GitHub repositories. Past 3 or 4 years, I've been involved in an IETF working group on writing standards draft specifications. And initially, we were just manually pushing drafts to IETF. More recently, we've been using GitHub, and there's tooling there whereby we just make updates to Markdown files and they get automatically published via GitHub Actions. So there are things people can do. One thing I didn't add here, I probably should, is again looking at the GitHub repository or the GitHub organization. There are lots of repositories, and it can be a bit hard to navigate. I think this is a point I've made when I've assessed other projects before, which is that have some kind of good organization, some navigational aids, which is very useful. There are some projects which I've noticed have a where you know where to start, and the starting page tells you how to branch off to particular aspects of the project that you might be interested in exploring further. So I think having something like that would be useful, a better organization. And there's a separate conversation about how we should be requiring annual reviews from standards projects as opposed to code projects. But again, it would be useful to have one place where we can see who are the project's maintainers, or in this case, I suppose, contributors or members. Like in the code projects, we ask the maintainers to have a maintainers.md file security.md file, which is probably not relevant here at this time. And but we have a contributing guidelines. I'm sure there are contributing guidelines for DOIP, which will be distinct from contributing guidelines for say Fabric or Cacti. But I think it'll be good to have one somewhere, which is easy to get to. So yeah, some bit more structure would be useful there. And sorry, I'll update my comment to reflect these later. And I just wanted to inquire from the maintainers whether if there are code spin-offs, like if some draft specifications get implemented as proof of concept, do they anticipate maintaining them under LFDT, or is it going to be somewhere else? Like I know this is supposed to be a standards project, but will code spin-offs also be part of LFDT or not? Just wanted to ask that.
So Rama, I've seen some code spin-offs already that exist in a sister project
Okay.
to LF Decentralized Trust, specifically the Open Wallet Foundation.
Right,
So they
yeah.
have been complete separate projects,
Mhm.
you know, if you will, in our terminology, code projects. So, you know, I would expect that to be the case for future sorts of projects coming from their standards as well, that would be reference implementations or things like that. I can't remember if we have any that are labs at this point from Trust over IP, but I do know of the one that is in the Open Wallet Foundation.
Yeah, I saw Diane had made note of that as well. Thanks.
Any comments or questions on the Trust over IP report? Just a reminder for the annual reports, we do have a vote on the TAC call here. So if you do have any questions, now would be a good time to ask them. Matthew?
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, thanks for the detailed review, Dan and Arun. I guess my question is just around, so this is an incubating project. I assume the implication is that this is going to stay incubating, and I just partly wondered around the spec-based projects, what graduation to like a graduated status would look like. So it's more of a general question around whether or not Trust over IP is planning to stay incubating in the longer term from what you have understood from the project.
So maybe Hart or Daniela can also weigh in with a little background. But for me, I think what we're waiting is for some of the specifications, the maturity of those to come to fruition. I think that would make it a little bit more out of incubating and into graduation. But as I don't actually know what we have for governance in place, I would defer to Hart, maybe, what you were thinking.
Well, I'll just
Or Tracy.
I'll remind everybody that one of the things that we did have on our goals for this year was to put together some sort of task force that would discuss just this topic, which is, you know, what sort of changes do we need to make to the project lifecycle to support other types of projects coming into LF Decentralized Trust that are more than just code. Now, as a reminder, we do have a non-creds, which is a specification, although there is also code associated with that. And so we've always treated it more as a code project than a standards project. But it is a combined code standards project. And so, you know, in general, I think people have probably more looked at the code than they have at the standard. Although the way that an uncreds works is, you know, they work on the code to help them develop the standard and vice versa. A trust over IP is different in the case that it is just standards, and the code projects are elsewhere, be them in another LF project or, you know, as some form of project within LFDT, whether that be a lab or kind of the top level type project. So I don't know that we have an answer to what those differences are, but that's definitely something that we thought we should work on this year, and we just have not yet gotten to that. I think maybe this might help us in some ways. This kind of being able to review this and see kind of what comes in, and I appreciate the sorts of suggestions that have been made here with the review as far as some of the things that maybe we should look at. Maybe part of this should be looking at whether or not a project has some sort of governance for the different sorts of stages that a project, I'm sorry, that a standard is in, right? So that process of moving from a draft to kind of a published standard would be a good sort of thing to have. Maybe that's even something that the TAC might provide initial sorts of guidelines around, right? I think there's a lot of work that is still left to be done when it comes to integrating full standards projects into LF Decentralized Trust and the governance specifically that we have within LF Decentralized Trust. This is obviously something that it would be great to, as is mentioned here, right, I think in the chat, get more collaboration between us and the Technical Steering Committee for Trust over IP, as well as any potential future sorts of folks that might want to be contributing their standards projects to LF Decentralized Trust to help really define this sort of information that we're looking for, that we have questions about. What does it mean to be graduated when it comes to a standards only project, and other sorts of things that I think are important. Diane, you mentioned the, should our templates be different for annual reviews and quarterly reviews for standards projects. I did put together this week just something that was generic that I think could satisfy both. I shared that link in the chat a bit earlier, I think, Diane, when you were going through the initial comments. These are all tasks that I think we and the rest of the larger community, especially the standards community, should be having conversations about and putting together some different recommendations about the way that we handle these sorts of things. Rama?
Yeah, I echo what you and Diane said about criteria for graduation being a published standard, or at least a reference specification that has also been implemented and shown that it can work. So just as inspiration from the ITF, whenever we propose a draft, before it's and when people are considering whether or not it should advance to an RFC specification, they want to see an actual implementation, which is why we have implementations of those specifications already within Cacti, and that is necessary. They don't actually even advance a draft until for consideration until they see a working implementation. So we could apply a similar standard here. I mean, if a specification gets converted into code, and that is something that we could consider as a criterion for graduation. And if it also gets used in a product, that's is icing on cake.
Yeah, I think, another thing, I was involved in a standards project a while back, not for long, so I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. But I think the other piece of, being a well-established sort of standards organization is one that really, has these periods of requests for comments, if you will, right? Where people are given a certain amount of time to provide comments, and then those comments are addressed, and then there's additional time, right? There's this whole sort of life cycle that goes around standards projects that, for probably a lot of us as people who've only been involved in developing code, may not be standard, not to use that word, but may not be typical in our world, if you will. And so these are all things that I think people who are involved in the standards projects can provide us some good insights into the sorts of things that would make something incubated versus graduated in the context of, the sorts of things that we're looking for graduated projects, which is maturity and diversity and that sort of thing. So, I think there's some similarities, but there's obviously a lot of differences. And if you recall, we did have that presentation by Jory months back, right, where we talked about the different types of standards projects. And I think there was some really good information in that deck for us to pull from as well as we continue kind of this process of understanding what it means to have different types of projects within LF Decentralized Trust.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for the comments. Yeah, I think this particular project feels like a good example of one that we can use as a reference for how we evolve the project kind of categories. It's clearly very active, very well used, and quite how the TAC wants that to kind of exist as a project in the LFDT. I think this is a good project to kind of base some of those discussions on.
Yeah, I do think we also have to, at some point within the TAC, have a general discussion about our projects that are consisting of multiple projects, right? And when does a project that has multiple projects become graduated? Is it when all of their multiple projects are in a graduated type stage? Is it when the majority of them are? Like, we don't really have any sort of way of handling those things yet either. We've, talked about it, but we haven't really had a further sort of conversation around documenting any of our thoughts that we might have. So I think there's a whole lot of sort of discussion that we need to be having in how we're handling things today versus how we handled them when we were Hyperledger, right? A lot of our governance came over from Hyperledger, but we haven't really expanded that thinking necessarily, or if we have, it hasn't been written down in our governance documents. So I think there's still a lot of work for us to be doing in, really helping others as well as ourselves understand what these different criteria are. Hart.
So yeah, one quick thing on this. You mentioned judging projects based on their sort of best or worst subproject. I don't think it's a good idea to judge it based on sort of the worst or the lowest or the least ready subproject. Lots of projects are going to sort of bring in new stuff or start new stuff. They may have experimental branches. They may have experimental plugins. And I think this is a healthy part of development as these things come along and develop. I would actually consider a project that has some sort of pristine code base and also some stuff that's less pristine, but moving more pristine to be healthier than a project that only has sort of a pristine code base. Because this sort of indicates, growth and advancement. So I would suggest making sure that we don't sort of judge projects based on every repo possible being pristine. We could ask projects to tag repos or forks or whatever, as production or non-production and judge them on that. But I think healthy projects will have some, not production ready parts of their code base.
Yeah, I'm with you, Hart. I think I use my phrasing from earlier as more of a way to get people to think about these sorts of things. I'm very much of the opinion that maybe we shouldn't be judging projects as a whole and having these kind of incubation and graduated sorts of life cycles, but actually looking at each of the individual pieces of work rather than the whole of the work. And obviously, I also agree that, the whole of the work that has some experimental and some that's mature is also more healthy, right? And so I think a lot of what all of this boils down to when we talk about project life cycle is how do we determine what's healthy and what's not healthy? I think we pretty much understand when things are not healthy, but I think we struggle with really those that are maybe partially healthy and understanding how to judge those, if you will, to use the word judge. I don't like that word per se. But you know, just to have some sort of thought about it. I really think it's more in line to help people understand the health of projects rather than um, you know, the judgment of those projects, right? Such that people can make a decision whether they want to participate, contribute, use that particular source base. So I think there's a lot for us to do. I think at one point I actually advocated getting rid of the whole project lifecycle in like a previous TAC term. And I did get some major pushback on that. So we still have a project lifecycle, but I'm still of the opinion that, you know, maybe there's a better way to do this that we haven't yet discovered. But these are definitely action items for us for future TAC calls to try and figure that out, as well as future task forces to help put together some suggestions for the TAC to consider. All right. Any other concerns about the trust over IP report, the annual report, before we kind of have a vote to approve it and get it put in to the source base?
I just would say that Daniela put a number of comments in the chat, so if you can check that. And I think a lot of the things you're referencing there, the delivers, I did reference in the annual and quarterly report. They do have a tremendous amount of output. So, you know, I'm totally happy to make a motion to approve these reports.
All right. Thanks, Diane, for the motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'm happy to second it.
Okay,
All right.
quick point of order.
Mhm.
Diane said approve the reports. And that's fine. I just want to make sure that, are we approving both reports or just the annual report? I would prefer to just approve both reports, but.
Well, I think that since they're together in the PR, I think that's why the approval of both reports, more than anything.
Gotcha.
Typically, you're correct, Ryan, that we would only approve the annual review, and then the quarterly reviews would be gone through the other process, which is the GitHub approvals. But yeah, I think since we're talking about kind of approval here, it has to be at the entire PR. Rama?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify in several previous annual reviews or annual reports, before we accepted the PR, we have appended the assessments to the submitted file. But in several others, we have not. So is there a standardized way of doing this? Because otherwise, the assessment will remain in the PR thread.
Yeah, I think it's ideal that we do add them. It helps us in the future if we have to come back and look at what sort of comments and notes we had. It's
Yeah.
sometimes hard to find them in the PR because the searching isn't necessarily what we would expect. It's much easier to just go to the report and see them there. So yeah, I would be open to approving the reports here as has been motioned. And then before we actually check them in, if they do get approved, to have the modification to those PRs before we actually commit the PR.
I think it might be better from a process flow
Yeah.
to submit a PR after the merge to get
Makes sense.
you know, just so we capture.
So yeah, merge the PR as it exists
Mhm.
now, and then create a PR that has the additions onto it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Rama,
for
can
that.
Rama, can I ask you to do that after this is done? Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So
Or
we do have the
Rye,
motion and the second standing with a bit of discussion in there. Are we ready for the vote?
Yeah. So, Marcus, in the matter before the TAC, how do you vote?
Approve.
Hendrik,
Approve.
Char,
Approve.
Tracy,
Yay.
Enrique,
Yay.
Diane,
Yay.
Rama,
Yay.
Arun,
Yes.
Matthew,
Yes.
Peter and Wenjing are not on the call, so the motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we do have one other topic that has been, that is officially on our agenda. Matthew, I believe that you were the one who brought this up. It is really a sneak preview of the idea that we're going to bring a proposal to the TAC on the Paladin Lab to bring that project into incubation. So did you want to talk to us about that, Matthew?
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. I thought it useful to mention this ahead of possibly next week having a proposal PR to be voted on by the TAC. I will just briefly share screen just to add a bit of context. Can you see that screen with the Paladin webpage?
We can,
Yeah.
yes.
So I guess just for a bit of background, there is an LFDT lab called Paladin, which became a lab, I think, late 2024, and has been kind of actively worked on for the whole time since. There is a related project which was actually prior to the LFDT switchover, which is under the Hyperledger Labs banner at the moment, called Zito, which is closely related to Paladin. So it's a standalone project for offering UTXO-based zero-knowledge proofs, and it is implemented as a plugin to Paladin. So Paladin has a very pluggable framework, and it provides a number of different privacy domains which can be implemented by third parties, and Zito is one such privacy domain. So the proposal that we're intending to put before the TAC in an upcoming call is to look at graduating the Paladin lab to incubating. So leaving labs and becoming an incubating project. But not only that, to bring Paladin and Zito under the same LFDT incubating project, and have Zito leaving lab status as well. We can go into specific kind of reasons around some of that thinking next week. But Zito and Paladin are used very closely together, even though Zito has kind of use cases and merit in its own right, that they are used so closely together that we think possibly keeping them as separate repositories, code repositories, but managing them and doing governance and community discussion about them under a single project banner would probably be the best way forward. So I wanted just to highlight that ahead of possibly, like I say, possibly having a proposal ready for next week. And I think just as part of that discussion, just looking at the template that we need to use to do that as well, just for a bit of kind of admin checking. So I'm not sure if the full proposal template is used for labs that are proposing to move to incubating. The original lab was proposed as you can see on screen here, with some detail about it. But obviously it was a much shorter proposal than a project proposal, which for which the LFDT has this template here. So just a bit of guidance would be useful on whether or not we should effectively write it as if it's a new project, or how to handle it as it's an existing lab. So any questions or comments on either of those, are very welcome now.
Yeah, so in the past, Matthew, we have had labs that have become projects and they have completed the entire template. Obviously there's a lot of information that already exists in your previous proposals that can be basically copy pasted directly into these sections.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is intended that each project that is proposed would have their own separate proposal in the project proposals repo so that we can keep track of those proposals.
Yeah.
The same way that we keep track of proposals if people want to move from incubated to graduated. Those also become then proposals in the project proposals repo.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'd certainly plan to have a standalone proposal for it. It was really how closely to follow the template here, but I think it makes sense just to use this template unless there's any reason not to. But yeah, thanks, Tracy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there may not be an awful lot of discussion or questions this week, but if people want to take a look at Paladin ahead of next week, they're very welcome to. And I have suggested some of the lead Paladin maintainers from Kaleido that they join next week's call as part of bringing that proposal forward and perhaps answering questions that the TAC has. Yeah, our aim would be to aim for next week, pending the ability to get the proposal ready for them.
I guess one
Yeah,
of
I
the
think
things I noticed just because here with Matt and we're talking about this, I don't know if we have LFX Insight set up for labs yet. I didn't see that set up. I'm like Diane, I like to see metrics of like, especially since it's a lab, we could maybe look at contributions and commits and issues and stuff, and that's like a good metric in an incubation proposal.
Yeah, I did have a little look at what the GitHub Insights give you, and it gives you some, but yeah, not all of the open scorecard and LFX Insights and things.
Don't know if we can wire that up further. I know Hyperledger Labs is in there, but I didn't see the actual LFTT Labs in LFX Insights. Just an FYI.
And I was just going to add, Matthew, I think obviously the sooner the proposal comes in, the better to give people a chance to review and dig in before the discussion. I think it's easier when people have that, chance to kind of get their thoughts in place. So if you were to say submit it next Wednesday, I'd probably say let's hold off until the following TAC call. If you're submitting it, tomorrow or even Monday, I might say, okay, that's probably enough time. But
Yeah.
obviously be aware that if you do submit it, even say Monday, right, that people may want an extra week just to get their head completely around it, even after the discussion. So, just be aware that people may need that time and that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Totally makes sense. Okay, I think that's all I had for now. Thank you for adding it to the agenda.
Okay, yeah, no worries. And then just as I mentioned, I did create a couple threads on Discord. One around the project reviews and the kind of template updates. Feel free to update that Google Doc. And then I also created a thread on what do we do for late project updates? Is there some sort of timeline that we want to give before we consider moving a project towards dormant? Or even archived, as the case may be. So we kind of did see that a little bit with Bevel, right? That 2 months was about the right time for Bevel to come back and say, yeah, I think we're ready to go to dormant. Because there was a message in Discord shortly after the report was due by Arun, and then I brought one up just, as I mentioned earlier this week when I put together the agenda, and that 2 months seemed to be the right period, but I'm happy for the discussion about late project updates and whether or not we want to make that more official in our governance to in Discord for us to have a discussion around, and eventually we'll bring it up for discussion, official discussion in TAC call. But just FYI, those 2 threads are out there for us to have some back and forth offline and not in a TAC call. So feel free to add your thoughts to either the Google Doc, the thread, or the other thread, as the case may be. Any other things that people want to bring up in the last 4 minutes that we should talk about quickly or be aware of? Okay, sounds like not. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out today's meeting. We will either be looking at an incubation proposal next week, or potentially we'll be taking a look at those 2 threads, depending on how things go. So with that, I'll close the meeting and talk to you all again next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tracy.
bye.
Yeah.